Hi team, Coach Alexa here. So I had a question in a couple of days ago from a female runner, I didn't mention her age, who's been quite happily running up to half marathon distance, doing all of her training, fueling her long runs with a nice bowl of porridge and a few other bits and pieces beforehand for a while now, but has more recently started getting digestive issues on runs. So that kind of urgent need to stop for a poo. The poo's probably a little bit loose. And it's off-putting, it's not nice, it's disruptive to our long run training. So she's just asking a bit of a question about that, what might be going on. She has already said that she's gone to see a doctor, which would always be my first recommendation for any kind of particularly sudden, but any changes to what's been your normal for a while in terms of digestive behaviour. So that box is ticked to get checked out. So a few thoughts here, and a reason in the intro that I mentioned that the woman in question didn't mention her age is because there may well be an age-related factor here. So if you're, in your mid-40s to mid-50s, perhaps premenopause, perimenopause might be a factor here. And I mention that because premenopause, perimenopause, and the menopause itself can really impact the sorts of foods that we need and want, and how we digest them and how our body reacts to certain foods as women. So there are some quite big changes afoot that can make some noticeable changes into the way our body deals with what we eat, and also the effectiveness and how our body deals with our pre and during run fueling. So if that's the age bracket you are in, then I would suggest a book called Roar, R-O-A-R, by Dr. Stacey Sims, all about training around, as a woman, around menstrual cycles, around the menopause, various different life stages, and a whole load on eating and what we can digest, how we digest it, what we need, and in what ways changes throughout our cycles and throughout our lives. So definitely a good read if you're in that kind of age bracket. One other thing that I see in myself and some friends and some runners is that another thing that can cause that kind of irritable, bowel stuff going on is stress or worry or anxiety. So our brain-gut connection is strong. When we're feeling stressed or anxious or worried, our digestive system is somewhat deprioritized because we're sort of a bit in flight, fight or freeze mode. So it's worth just thinking if there have been any life changes that have caused a bit of an uptick in stress, worry or anxiety recently. I mean, they're not necessarily always easy to fix, but sometimes noticing those and realising the impact it might be having on our bodies and our digestion is food for thought, something to ponder or investigate a little. The final one is, perhaps there are things you can do, even though these foods have worked really well for you so far, perhaps there's some things that you can do to tweak that food and fueling approach for your runs to help. So a general rule of thumb is to think about what you're eating in the 24 or maybe even 48 hours in advance of a long run, avoiding too much fibre, any spicy foods or any foods that are too high in fat, for example, fried foods. So all of those will kind of irritate our digestion, particularly our bowels, somewhat. So are best avoided pre-run. Now, most people, hopefully, are not eating something massively and spicy and fried the night before a long run, but if you are, probably good to nip that in the bud and swap out with an alternative. Fibre is a little bit more of a difficult one because, high fibre foods are generally quite healthy foods, but high fibre content actually speeds up digestive transit. Running also speeds up digestive transit. So combine the two together and we could be in for a few challenges. So I'm thinking the sort of popular foods that have a relatively high fibre content that runners go to for fuel pre and during runs. Dried fruit, I'd give that a bit of a miss. Even oats in your porridge have reasonably high fibre content. So perhaps you mentioned maybe swapping the porridge out for a bagel, a white bagel, so avoiding the whole grains and the brown bread, sticking for white bread. Maybe swapping out for a different breakfast cereal that's a lower fibre content. You can also somewhat reduce the potential irritability of something like oats, which are a little bit harder to digest and absorb for the body, by doing overnight oats. So by soaking your oats in whatever liquid it is that you have with your oats, pop it in the night before, pop it in the fridge, and then heat it up from there, because the liquid, the oats sitting in the liquid will already start to break down a little bit more, so the work that your body has to do to digest them reduces a little bit, so that might help too. So a few ideas and food for thought there. I hope that's really useful.